Sneedville. Or, come to think of it, since Sneedville has been taken over by Kingsport, Kingsport is going to reinstitute their traditional name for the place, Chuckville. If Knoxville can take control, then the name, they'll tear down all the signs and they'll put new signs up and they'll say this is Sneedville, formerly Chuckville. Although they won't admit it was formerly Chuckville because they maintain that it was always part of the greater Knoxville sphere of influence. Today, we're going to look at three possible plans for the attackers, Kingsport, to keep Knoxville on their heels. We're going to look at three plans for Knoxville to try and reclaim the town of Sneedville and possibly lay siege to Kingsport, force them to surrender and come to the negotiating table and give up all claim forever and ever, or until we decide to do our next campaign in this area. But before we do, by popular request, we needed a national flag for both the nation of Knoxville and the nation of Kingsport. This lovely red flag is Knoxville's national flag. The symbol that you see here is the logo for Knoxville itself. I'm going to let the real world do as much heavy lifting for me as possible. And then again, on the other side of the ledger, we've got Kingsport. I used a red background for Knoxville. I'm going to use a blue background for Kingsport. See the little blue chips? See the red chips? Red versus blue. Parallel construction makes it easier to remember all this stuff, and boy howdy do we have a lot to remember. I mean, not really. All this fluff is just to add a little context and interest. This blue flag is also Kingsport's logo. That is Bays Mountain, which can be seen from the lovely downtown. I believe it's the Bays Mountain is like right here in Virginia. Bear in mind, Kingsport in our life, in our world, is on the border of eastern Tennessee and western Virginia. Hence, you may notice some of the unit names for the Blue Army are the Virginians. The Heavy Grenadiers they're named after, one of them is named after, it's the Dollywood Exiles, because Dollywood is down here. And so canonically, the security guards at Dollywood have moved up and they serve as the backbone of the heavy hitters for Kingsport. Again, the real world is as fascinating as anything we can come up with, so we're going to beg, borrow, and steal from it as much as possible. In fact, we are also going to steal the names of our generals from the real world. We are going to pay tribute and homage to the men who fell fighting in the Civil War. These are our brothers. At least, speaking as an American, doesn't matter which side you fought on. It was brother on brother. They are all my cousins. So we pay respect to both sides, and I named the Kingsport Generals after a couple of soldiers who fought on the side of the Confederacy. Although with blue, I probably should have named them after the Union, right? The Blue Bellies. And for Knoxville, I named their generals after some of the carpetbaggers who came down into the region. Now, we'll go over those in just a little bit. I chose the guys who either had the highest rank, although one of the highest ranked guys on the side of the Confederate was, I think it was on the Confederate, he was one of those Masons who were free, and we don't respect that regardless of what they did on the battlefield. So get out of here with you, and we went with just some of the more interesting guys. Whenever we had a photo, we took that, and we'll go over that in a second. But first, the point of today's episode is let's talk about the different strategies that we have. And before we get to that, I want to show you a little snapshot of where things are in the aftermath of the Battle of Cemetery Hill. Hat tip to the leper raptor who ran that battle for us. The Army of the East drubbed Roger's army. But driving them from the field was not enough. They were very concerned about this Green's army just a few miles away coming down and hitting them in the flank. So they maintained good order. They said, do not pursue them. We'll let them escape. We gave them a pretty good bloody nose, pretty good pounding. We let them know who's boss. And now we need to worry. Now, they didn't know that Green's army was stationed as a mobile reserve and was ordered, don't cross the line here. I misspoke in the last video in that live stream. I said it was September 28th. It's actually September 29th when we ran those fights, both this one here in Morristown and this one up here at Big Stone Gap. It was the 29th. So on the 30th, in this case, you have a day of kind of licking wounds and judging things. And then up here, we had a day off, I think it was. Let me check my campaign diary. Is not nearly as nice. If you're following Henry Hyde's progress, he's got a nice leather-bound book, but I prefer the 10th grade, what do you call it, co-ed look. So what I have here is just a brief outline of what happened on the 24th. Oh, there it is. On the 29th, the Battle of Moreland Cemetery. The Joe's Army enters Sneedville and secures it. So that's on the 29th. And on the 30th, they hold. What else do we have here? We had Big Stone Gap. The Harlan Blitz took the Big Stone Gap on the 1st. So that's going to happen on the 1st. And they're going to have to take the 2nd to secure it. They took it on a surprise assault. Remember, they were thrown back. Outnumbering their opponent 6-1 was not enough. Those Big Stone Gap boys have some big stones. I just figured out where the town gets its name from. The point being, these guys are not going to be able to take any action until October 3rd. Everybody else is going to be able to move on October 1st. So let's take a look at what they might do. Now, on October 1st, new orders come down, and I'll just remind you real briefly that the Blue Army has, for whatever reason, rivers do not affect them as much as usual. Either their scouts find fords, maybe the water levels are low and they're the only ones that realize it. Knoxville doesn't realize it. Maybe they have pontoons that have come up with all of their armed forces. Whatever the reason, if you fight out a tabletop battle from the 1st through the 7th, and there's a river or a stream, give these guys the benefit of the doubt. Also, that will be true on the map-based movement, although I don't know that that's going to be a big deal because there's plenty of bridges all over the place. The last thing we should point out is that Rogers' army, when they retreated, they hit Lake Cherokee here. Now, bear in mind, Lake Cherokee here, the bridge is located where this lake narrows. This lake is a couple of miles across at its widest. Here, it is only several hundred yards, and it is a very substantial bridge with a couple of potential fords. So they could have beat it back to Bean Station, but upon noticing that they were not being pursued, they kind of pulled up short. So I would put it at about 5 miles. I'm going to put them at a camp. There's a little thing called Camp Cherokee on a little peninsula right next to the bridge. That is where they have bivouacked, waiting to see what their orders are for the next step. And that's where you come in. You have to help us decide those orders. So we will start with the attacker first. And once again, to remind those of you that are new to the campaign, the way we do this, I'm going to present 3 different possibilities. We're going to take a poll. You vote for the one you like best. And then after the weekend is over, probably, I know today's for you regulars, today is Fistful of Fridays. We're going to bump that to Monday. I'm going to give you guys several days, at least over the weekend, to vote on which of these plans is the one you want. You're going to be able to vote for both if you like. And then we're going to use the percentages for these 3 plans to decide which is the one that actually gets implemented. In other words, you guys exert great control. If there is a plan that is 90 to 10, that you guys are 90 to 10 in favor of, there's a 90% chance that the dice gods will choose that one. So it's a great way, and the reason we're doing that is because it allows for uncertainty. When you vote for what the Blue Army should do, you don't know what the Red Army is going to be doing either. That means that there's a little bit of fog of war. You pick the best option for Red, not knowing what Blue is going to do. You pick the best option for Blue, not knowing what Red is going to do. That gives us 9 different interactions that might result. And in fact, if you have some wrinkles, if you think, man, I am really in support of this particular plan, except for this element, throw a comment into beneath the poll. Say, I voted for X, but I really think you should change it via Y. And if I see an overwhelming, and remember, this is comments on YouTube, so overwhelming is like 3 guys. If I see overwhelming concurrence that that's the way to implement that plan, we'll make that little change as well. Or again, maybe we just roll dice. Hey, on evens, we'll stick with the plan as written. On odds, we'll go with whoever made the recommendation. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense. So let's take a look at 3 plans for the attackers first. They kind of have the initiative after all. One last thought that I have to enter in. I know what the weather is like for this upcoming week, but you don't, because the generals don't. I just did it so that I've got it ready to go when you guys tell me what these 2 nations are going to do in pursuit of Chucks, formerly Sneedvilles. And we'll run down these plans, these operations, slideshow style. Red and blue arrows should help keep straight what exactly is going on where. In the first, I should also point out, these orders will be good for 1 week and 1 week only. At the end of the week, we will roll for new random events. I'm going to put the polls up and leave them up over the weekend into next week. And hopefully by next Friday, we'll be able to figure out where these armies are meeting and what our next battles will be. Some of these plans call for marches that are longer than 1 week. That's okay. At the end of the week, we'll reassess the situation and see if our war councils and ministers of defense have new orders for the generals of both sides. We're going to start with the attackers. As I said, they have the initiative, so let's see what their options are. The first option here you see on screen is Operation Delay is the Way. The idea here is you already hold Chucksville, so why don't you dispatch a small force up to Big Stone Gap to deal with the Harlan Blitz. The Harlan Blitz is badly bloodied, so 1 unit of horse, 1 unit of foot, you've got the advantage of numbers there. Then down in the south, what you're going to do is you're going to have Rogers' army take a second stab at the Army of the East. They were lucky to win that first fight. Now the Army of the East is battered, so are you. And remember, they're sitting at Camp Cherokee, so they're only 5 miles away. They're going to be able to pursue and hit them on the same day. Meanwhile, because the Army of the East is distracted, Greene's army can drop down to I-81 and make a sprint for Knoxville. What that does is it forces the Army of the West, to drop down and pursue. Everybody is distracted in the north. Even if you're getting beat up in that area, you're slowing them down. You're hurting them bad. You're buying time for the campaign to end. Remember, 3 days of snow in November. That's when the snows start to show up. If we get 3 days of snow, the campaign ends. Whoever controls Sneedville wins. That's only 4 weeks away. So the campaign could be over as early as November 3rd. Probably, and then the longest we'll go is December 15th. Probably be somewhere mid to late November. Maybe a little too early for this kind of gambit, but hey, you might as well give it a shot, right? The second option that we have is Operation Hodl. And again, this is a hold the line. So the first one is kind of an aggressive approach. This one is kind of a defensive approach. You're going to dispatch that detachment up to deal with the Harlan Blitz. We don't need those guys in our backfield. But where this one differs is we are going to go ahead and destroy the Army of the East first. That is our priority. Hit them with everything you got. That's going to be tomorrow, the next day. Basically, you're ordering the 2 generals of Greene's army and Rogers' army to pursue the Army of the East, catch them, and destroy them. That's Operation Hodl. You're not telling them to go any deeper. You're not telling them to pursue anybody else. Just hold the line right here. Then the third option for you guys is Operation Second Push. We're going to take the fight to Knoxville, and this is probably the most aggressive of the plans. We're going to go ahead. We already control Chuckville, so we're going to go ahead and just storm on the Army of the Pines with Jones' army. They really want to be bloody. We're going to pull Rogers' army over Lake Cherokee and send them up to clean up the 450. These guys sitting here in Tazewell. Get up there, deal with them. We're going to send 2 armies north, and we're going to use the fresh Greene's army to pound the now battered Army of the East. Remember, Greene's army has a lot of fresh guys, but the Army of the East is hurting. You can catch them tomorrow. So they still maintain kind of a mobile reserve, but they are being used much more aggressively. So there's your 3 options. Now let's take a look at the options for Knoxville. In the case of Knoxville, they have 3 options as well. One kind of aggressive, one kind of defensive, and one kind of somewhere in the middle. The most aggressive is, look, Sneedville is the goal. We have to take Sneedville. Throw everything you can at Sneedville. But what we're going to do, because the Army of the West is so large, we're going to dispatch a detachment. We're going to bust it in half. Half of that army is going to go up to Sneedville. Half of that army is going to go down to support the Army of the East, and as it holds those 2 armies. Now, they probably notice Greene's army isn't moving, so they may figure that Greene's army is not going to cross the border, and with some reinforcements, they can finally just completely put Rogers' army out of the fight. As I said, that's Operation Full Sneed ahead, but it says that on the screen, so you probably figured that out. The second option is Operation Hey Diddle Diddle. In this case, everyone moves forward, but we're going to use a more even front. The Harlan Blitz is going to, instead of Sneedville, it's going to continue its march on Kingsport, and we're going to take the 450 in Tazewell. We're going to merge them with the Army of the Pines, and we're going to go jump on the Jones army. We're going to make a push for Sneedville. And then we're going to go ahead and try to finish off the Rogers army hey, the Army of the East won. Now Rogers' army is backed up against Lake Cherokee. There's no way to escape. But because we're vulnerable to Green's army, now we're going to bring up the Army of the West. We're going to bring the Army of the West into that southern flank and really use their numbers to make something happen. If we do Operation Hey Diddle Diddle. Now, Operation Softly Softly Catchy Monkey is a slow developing plan. We're not going to do a direct assault on Sneedville. Instead, we're going to make a full run on Kingsport. And in this case, we'll bring the Army of the Pines down through Tazewell, pick up some extra troops, and drop down into the Maynardville, Coreyton area. And we'll use them as a reserve to protect Knoxville. Meanwhile, we're going to drop the Army of the East down into White Pine. See if we can, maybe even down through Newport, and then march them up through Greenville to try to sweep around that southern flank and get at Kingsport. The Harlan Blitz may already be there laying siege. If we can bring this second army into position, one, it will force the Green's army to pull off and pull away. That leaves us with a one-on-one fight between the Army of the West and Rogersville, and we're going to win that one every time. So that is a much more aggressive plan. It does have that little defensive force in the form of the Army of the Pines, unblooded and ready to go. There's your three options. When this video goes live on Friday, go ahead and take a look after you've watched this at the community tab for the two polls. I will set those to go live at pretty much the exact same time as this. Maybe I have to delay it 15 minutes depending on the user interface for YouTube. But that gives us 9 different possibilities. 3 options for each side. They interact in a lot of different ways, and there's just no telling what's going to happen next. Once again, use the comment section of the polls for any suggestions you have to refine any of these plans. We will take those into consideration when we do our live stream to decide who is really doing what. The one thing I want to leave you guys with is the generals. Starting with Knoxville, the Army of the West is going to be led by General Beeler. And here you see on screen a picture of what General Beeler looked like back in the day, and then a little bit back in the later day is the bigger picture. He was a fifer for the 8th Tennessee Infantry, and once again, I'm using his image and his name as a means of paying respect and remembering him. I can't build a great big pile of rocks. I cannot build a Tower of Giza, nor can I build, well, hey, you know what? Given where we're located, I can't build any like Cahokia-style mounds, but I can say, hey, remember this guy, all right? He fought for our nation, and now he's been promoted to general. The Army of the East is Andrew Jackson Brock. He served with the 7th Tennessee Mounted Infantry. Mountaineers. We got like Civil War Dragoon here. He, lived to a ripe old age, as you can tell from the picture. And now we can talk about General Brock. For the Army of the Pines, we have a handsome young man with is that probably a Colt pistol he's hanging on to, and his gravestone. These, again, are all located, these are graves that are located within Union County, Tennessee, which is near the center of our battlefield area. Actually, I think it's kind of down, maybe a little south. Be that as it may, General Steiner, he served with the 2nd Tennessee Infantry. He is now taking command of the Army of the Pines. And then our last one, our cavalryman. Look at this guy. Look at this handsome lad. This is Isaac C. Haynes. He was with the 8th Tennessee Cavalry. Man, we got to use a cavalry officer for the Harlan Blitz, don't we? So he's probably the senior ranking officer in the cavalry that's with the Harlan Blitz, and now he's commanding that little detachment on a daring sweeping maneuver. For the guys on the other side, we'll start with the Major. Well, now he's a General Hurst. He's commanding Rogers' army, and man, what a tombstone he has. From the heart of hell, he spits at the carpetbaggers. The Kingsport Generals are all taken from Confederate soldiers, and remember we talked about the Tennessee Valley Authority. They stole a whole bunch of land, and I know that's going to blow your mind that the federal government in the United States had an agreement with people, and then they just said, nah, and took the land. I bet you thought that only happened to Native Americans. Well, it happened to the second wave of Native Americans, too. So, boy, he's for eternity. His shouts of injustice will echo from the grave. Less so about the Civil War, oddly, and more so about the aftermath and Reconstruction and the drowning of his home. For all I know, his home was beneath Lake Cherokee before it was taken out from under him. Anyway, we're also looking at the Army of Jones. These guys up here playing it very conservative. General Matthew Patton. Hey, we've got a General Patton. How about that? That's a good sign, isn't it? And then in a weird bit of synchronicity, one of the guys who had a photo on here was Private Greenberry Lander Donahue. And he is going to be, his name is Greenberry? There's only one army he could command, right? The Green's army. What do we got here? Kind of weird how that synchronicity happens, huh? He obviously survived the Civil War. He fought as a private. And I didn't write down the units that these Confederate guys served in. Typical Yankee. What do you expect? God bless all these men. And this is just our way of paying a little bit more homage and tribute to the men on both sides of that tragic conflict. So you have all the information you need now to make your decisions. Of course, if you want to jump on Google Earth and look at these real-world terrain and topography and, maybe come up with some better plans, make a suggestion. I'm open to it. It's our campaign. We're having a great time. I'm really looking forward to the next set of battles because the first set was amazing. And I really want to see what you guys do with some of these fights that I think are going to get to be more and more uneven as time wears on. Until then, I'm Mr. Wargaming, and I'm praying for you.